Good morning and welcome. I'm Katherine McGrady, the CEO of CNA. It's heartening to see all of you here and to know that there are many more of you online. And it's because we're grappling with a question today that's vital to the U.S. national security, a question posed to CNA by the Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy. How should the Department of Navy prepare to compete with China below the level of armed conflict? Chief of Staff Díaz asked for us to do this work quickly. As the Department of Navy's Center for Naval Analyses, we've been looking at many of the issues we had to address in this study, and we've been looking at those issues for a very long time. The study results that you'll hear about today are based on a foundation of deep knowledge and insights into Navy issues and operations, built over time, in fact, 80-plus years. In addition to having the foundation of expertise to answer the tough question that we'll be talking about today, we brought expertise from across CNA for this work. Our China experts, our recruiting and retention experts, our training experts, our force structure and design experts. They all came together for this work. It simply would not have been possible to answer the question adequately by focusing on any single area of expertise. We added to this group of experts our deep operational experience. So the effort was cross-CNA, and it was intense. At CNA, we never presume that our analysis represents the final answer. It is always provided as a step forward in the discussion. So I can't think of a more valuable way to launch this new report than with a panel of the caliber assembled today. So let me get out of the way of that discussion and hand over the mic to the Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Navy, Mr. Chris Díaz. Chris?
Thank you. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be with you here today this morning at the National Press Club. And thank you, Dr. McGrady, for, we've all benefited from your leadership, and I benefited greatly from your counsel. Please join me in recognizing Dr. Finkelstein and his team for researching, drafting, and presenting the report we're here today to discuss. Dave, you and your team are forever in the Navy's debt. For over 80 years, the Department of the Navy has benefited greatly from the insights provided by the talented team of professionals at CNA. And we're here grateful to them for taking on this challenge. Admiral Foggo, sir, thank you for your years of dedication to the service, for your leadership as the Dean to the Center for Maritime Strategy at the Navy League, and for moderating today's panel. Also thanks to Mr. Steve Brock, Senior Advisor to the Secretary of the Navy, Admiral Schlise, General Lightfoot, thank you very much for being here as well, gentlemen. And for Dr. Andrew Mara for your role in this as well. The Department of the Navy is clear-eyed about the challenges we face as a nation and the significance of the role we play during this era of strategic competition with the People's Republic of China. We are confronting this moment with urgency. The impetus for this report stems from the fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 913, which codifies into law for the first time our department's responsibility for organizing, training, and equipping forces for the peacetime promotion of the national security interest and prosperity of the United States. Many in the audience will recognize that this is not a new mission for the Navy. Today, like every day for the past 248 years, our sailors and Marines are standing the watch, defending our national security interest and securing our prosperity. Our Navy and Marine Corps team maintain a global posture with over a third of our fleet and over 30,000 Marines deployed on any given day, from the Indo-Pacific to Europe, in Africa, South America, and the Middle East. Allow me to provide a few examples. We're providing material support to our partners in Ukraine as they fight to restore their national territorial sovereignty in the face of Russia's illegal and unprovoked attack. We are maintaining a strong naval presence throughout the Middle East to deter aggression and prevent escalation, with the USS Carney, USS Thomas Hudner, and USS Mason all playing a critical role in defending commercial shipping against missiles, drones, and piracy. In the Indo-Pacific, we continue to work to counter the malign influence of other nations, centered on ensuring the seas and skies of the region remain free and open, a vision we share for the region with our international allies and partners. It is important to recognize that we sustain this global presence I just highlighted with an all-volunteer force of nearly 1 million sailors, Marines, and civilians, representing communities from across our great nation. And we operate every day alongside our allies and partners. We're also a learning organization, and we constantly seek to improve the readiness and posture of our fleet and our force. Secretary Del Toro understands the challenges we face in the maritime domain, and he has charted a course for us to address them. At the beginning of his tenure as the 70th Secretary of the Navy, he outlined 3 enduring priorities to guide the actions, decisions, and investments for our department. While this report contains recommendations as to how we can improve, and we'll discuss those during the panel, please allow me a few moments to highlight the progress our department is making along those 3 enduring priorities, which are strengthening maritime dominance, building a culture of warfighting excellence, and enhancing our strategic partnerships. The Navy remains focused on the modernization of our fleet through several high-priority acquisition programs. Construction continues across several classes of warships and submarines, including Ford-class carriers, Arleigh Burke Flight III destroyers, Constellation-class frigates, and Columbia and Virginia-class submarines. The Marine Corps remains committed to investing in acquiring the knowledge, technologies, and platforms to support its force design initiatives, which is focused on ensuring our Marines are agile, mobile, and lethal as they return to their core mission of projecting maritime power from both the sea to the shore and from the shore to the sea. As we consider what the right mix of platforms for our fleet and force looks like, we are exploring how to incorporate uncrewed systems that operate above, on, and below the sea to provide our sailors and Marines with competitive advantages. Right now, uncrewed maritime platforms are underway with Task Force 59 in the Middle East, 4th Fleet in the Caribbean, and 7th Fleet in the Indo-Pacific region, increasing our commanders' maritime domain awareness and allowing for better management of our crewed ships, aircraft, and submarines. Leveraging uncrewed platforms at scale will provide us with an enduring competitive advantage in battle space awareness and provide us, our allies, and our partners with a greater awareness of who is operating in our shared waters. This effort is part of our department's larger science and technology initiative to innovate at the speed of relevancy, both in technology and capability adoption as well as in business practices. Over the last 2 years, we've established several new organizations focused on accelerating innovations that address our fleet and force's critical capability gaps through the rapid identification, experimentation, prototyping, adoption, and fielding of technologies, systems, and platforms. The Naval Innovation Center, Marine Innovation Unit, Navy Disruptive Capabilities Office, Marine Corps Rapid Capabilities Office are now key force multipliers contributing to our robust naval innovation ecosystem. They are empowered to collaborate with industry, academia, and other government agencies to ensure we are delivering the right solutions to our warfighters. Our ongoing innovation efforts also include adopting new acquisition processes. PEO IWS and PEO Land Systems are conducting pilot programs focused on developing a capabilities-based portfolio approach to system and platform development. This is a paradigm shift we look forward to expanding to other PEOs in the near future. These efforts are more than just changing how we do business when it comes to program acquisition. They are representative of a broader shift in our cultural mindset of how we approach and implement innovative practices to make the Department of the Navy more agile in the adoption of the capabilities our sailors and Marine Corps require. But our Navy and Marine Corps are more than just advanced systems and platform. As I mentioned earlier, we are proud to count nearly 1 million of our fellow Americans amongst our ranks, and we're committed to taking care of them and their families. Over the past 2 years, Department of Navy leadership has made a priority for our department to focus on improving quality of life and quality of service initiatives, including housing, childcare, and increasing access to mental health services. We are also expanding our naval education enterprise to provide increased opportunities for sailors, Marines, and civilians at all ranks and pay grades to pursue opportunities to develop skill sets our services need, including investments in the programs that enhance their ability to think and operate at the strategic level. Internationally, our department plays a significant role in several agreements and security pacts, from AUKUS, the Quad, the trilateral relationship between the US, Japan, and Korea, in the Indo-Pacific, NATO and Europe, the combined maritime forces with 38 partner nations in the Middle East, as well as participating in several exercises around the world, including South America and Africa. In recognition of the breadth and depth of our department's responsibilities, President Biden advocated for a 4.5% increase in our budget as part of the fiscal year 2024 request to Congress, ensuring the Navy and the Marine Corps have the funding they need to continue executing their responsibilities. As we reflect on the last 2 years, we are proud of the progress we have made in support of our sailors, Marines, and their families, as well as our international partners and allies, but there is still more work to be done. The complexity of geopolitical challenges and the pace of technological change require us to act with urgency, both in our naval services and throughout the entire federal government. In September, Secretary Del Toro called for a new vision for our nation's approach to maritime statecraft. From our vantage point, maritime statecraft is a Department of the Navy-led effort to drive awareness, advocacy, and action to rebuild our national comprehensive maritime power. This is necessary due to the area of strategic competition we are in with the PRC, which, over the past 2 decades, have made tremendous progress on their maritime strategy. They've invested time, energy, and resources in building up their commercial and naval shipbuilding industries, forging new international partnerships with maritime aspects like overseas naval bases and interest in commercial ports, and engaging in coercive and confrontational tactics to force their Indo-Pacific neighbors into acquiescing to their maritime claims. For our department, maritime statecraft is a novel approach to strategic competition that requires new ways of thinking and acting. For example, the PRC is engaged in leveraging national instruments of power beyond diplomatic, intelligence, military, and economic, to include information, financial, legal, and development. This construct is called midfield. At the cross-section of military, economic, and financial, we remain concerned about the impact of adversarial capital to the startup ecosystem that we rely on for advancement in the cutting-edge technologies of today and into the future. We're taking action to reduce our department's exposure to adversarial capital, including the work of the Foreign Investment Review Office in Research, Development, and Acquisition, and the establishment of the Directorate for Innovation Protection Policy, both highlighted in the report as positive steps. Beyond protecting critical technologies, we are also taking action to boost the resilience of our domestic shipbuilding and ship repairs industries. Last month, Secretary Del Toro convened the inaugural meeting of the Government Shipbuilders Conference, bringing together our partners within the Department of Defense, as well as in commerce, transportation, and homeland security. Tomorrow, Secretary Del Toro will be in Philadelphia to speak with industry representatives at the Naval Nuclear Submarine and Aircraft Carrier Suppliers Conference on the topic of workforce development and discuss additional areas where we can better support them. Our focus on the domestic shipbuilding and ship repair industries, as well as developing the workforce to support them, is directly in line with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's efforts to more deeply integrate domestic and foreign policy by reshoring critical strategic initiatives and industries. These industries are critical to our national maritime power, and we're grateful for the strong bipartisan call within Congress to offer their support to our key maritime sectors. We will continue to work with our partners on the Hill to generate solutions that will reinforce our global position as a maritime power. As I said earlier, we've made tremendous progress over the past 2 years in bolstering the readiness and modernization of our fleet and our force, and we are encouraged by the many efforts from across industry, academia, and government to ensure our maritime services and industries are capable of meeting our national security needs. However, we must also recognize that managing this competition is the challenge of our time and will require a unity of effort across our entire government. Conversations like the one we are having today contribute to our national dialogue on how to best approach building our comprehensive national maritime power. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. We look forward to discussing this report and how its recommendations will inform our department's way forward in this era of strategic competition with the PRC. Thank you for your attention and for your commitment to the success of the world's finest Navy and Marine Corps. yours.
Well, good morning. In my few minutes, I'm going to cover 3 items. First, I'll provide some additional context for the study. Second, I will comment on the nature of the challenge the study focuses on. And third, speak briefly to the section of the report that touches on the need to enhance strategic partnerships. So first, some additional context. So with the new NDA language in the foreground, the fundamental mission that we were given was to produce a public domain paper that would provide the Department of the Navy with recommendations on where the department could focus in the near to midterm to better position itself for strategic competition with the PRC below the threshold of conflict. An additional criterion that we were given was to focus on issues that the Secretary can affect, basically Title X issues, and remain in that lane. And third, we were also asked by the sponsor to make this a quick turnaround project, so we had to be very selective in what we chose to cover. So frankly, not every issue that deserves to be discussed is discussed. As Katherine said, by no means do we consider this the final word, but rather part of a larger discussion. So if this publication stimulates debate, then it has served its purpose. As for the paper's structure, you'll notice that we chose to organize our analyses and recommendations around the department's 3 priorities, which Mr. Díaz already mentioned, namely, strengthening maritime dominance, building a culture of warfighting excellence, and enhancing strategic partnerships. And finally, as for data, there were really 4 key sources of data. And of course, we're from CNA, we're analysts, we always have to talk about the data, and you deserve to know where the data came from. First, 4 sources, strategic documents produced by the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, and the Department of the Navy. And of course, second, we convened, and this was really interesting, we convened a series of focus groups comprised of officers from the Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Joint Staff, as well as Department of the Navy civilians. And some of the folks who managed those focus groups are here today, Tamara and Marianne sitting out there. These were very productive events that really helped our analytic team identify some of the key concerns that are out there in the 2 services. And third, we conducted desk-side discussions with serving and retired high-ranking DON officials, a retired CNO who shall go unnamed. Only I will take that secret to my grave. And fourth, and this was really quite important, we drew from a sizable body of already accomplished CNA analyses that had already, in the course of our day-to-day work over the months, weeks, and years, had already addressed some of the issues that were inherent in the larger study. So, and I would also underscore again what Katherine brought up earlier, that this effort engaged the entire federally funded Research and Development Center. I will tell you, if you take a look at the product and you take a look at the author, this is probably one of the first times I can recall in my many years at CNA where the author was Center for Naval Analyses and not an individual project team. But on the inside cover, you'll see that fully 45 members across every division, personnel, readiness, weapons, technology, policy, strategy, regional affairs, everybody in our FFRDC contributed. So everybody is equally guilty, I suppose, of producing this paper, depending on your point of view. So next, a few comments on the nature of the challenge, which really is the heart of what this product was about. And at bottom, when I thought about this, there were really 2 challenges that were driving this particular product. One that was an internal challenge and one that was an external challenge. The internal challenge, of course, is the question of how a Navy and Marine Corps that is usually designed to fight and win the nation's future wars can become equally adept at a peacetime competition in the here and now with a PRC that has become, in fact, a global maritime power. This institutional challenge, this internal challenge, quickly becomes a discussion about priorities and resources, about trade-offs and risk. And so the bulk of this report focuses not on China, frankly, but on the internal challenges that the department is going to have in grappling with these issues. And the report's many recommendations speak to suggested investments in new capabilities, the need for highly trained sailors, Marines, and DON civilians, as well as enhanced partnerships here at home and also abroad. And Gordon and Ann's remarks are going to give some of the specifics of those in just a moment. And also, please note that each chapter also identified where we thought the department was making positive strides already. The external challenge. The external challenge really is the reality that the People's Republic of China has become a maritime and naval power in its own right. Now, I'm a historian, so I can't help but pointing out that this is the first time China has been a maritime power since the Ming Dynasty, the 15th century. The initial chapter of this study offers an articulation of the maritime and naval dimensions of the U.S. PRC strategic competition, the dimension of this competition that concerns, obviously, the Department of the Navy at its core. It argues that one of the most consequential results of over 4 decades of PRC military modernization has been the transformation of the PLA Navy from a brown water coastal defense force to an ocean-going Navy with incipient expeditionary capabilities and a growing global presence. And today, as we all know, by ship count, the PLA Navy is the largest in the world, a force of some 340 ships and submarines with a growing aviation component. But beyond naval issues, the chapter underscores that Beijing today is a global maritime power, and that's maritime with a capital M. The PRC's merchant fleet is the 3rd largest in the world, some 7,000 vessels compared to the U.S. at about less than 200, actually. I think 170 was the latest count that I had. I don't know if you have better numbers at the Navy League, Admiral Foggo. Beijing's shipbuilding capacity and maritime industrial base is enormous compared to that of the United States, and its stake in global port infrastructure is ubiquitous and growing. For this reason, the report gives voice to recent calls for the United States to consider developing a national maritime strategy. Finally, a few words on the chapter entitled Enhancing Strategic Partnerships. Given renewed emphasis across the Department of Defense on working with allies and partners, it's not surprising that the report provides recommendations in that space. But I'll just give you 2 that we thought were very germane to the Department of the Navy. First, we thought that examining the health of the Navy and Marine Corps' foreign area and regional area officers programs ought to be conducted in order to ensure that they are serving the needs of the sea services. Do we have the right mix of foreign expertise in those programs? Are these officers being utilized, and are they competitive within their services? Beyond foreign area officers, we recommended considering the expansion of foreign immersion experiences with ally and partner nations for line officers, not just FAOs, but line officers. For example, selecting competitive unrestricted line officers for attendance at foreign war colleges, for assignments as liaison officers with allied staffs, or fellowships at foreign defense-related think tanks. These are opportunities that could provide invaluable experiences to these officers as they climb the ladder of progression and as they return to the fleets in positions of increasing responsibility. And this is not easy because there are concerns about competitiveness. And so the naval personnel system has an important place to play here, and Ann will speak to that. And here at home, of course, the report underscores the need for the department to engage with partners in the industrial sector. Chris mentioned already what the Secretary's meeting tomorrow with our business partners. But we focused, among other things in the report, on the need to partner with industry to collectively protect our advanced technologies, because technological competition between the U.S. and PRC is one of the major dimensions of peacetime competition below the threshold of conflict, among other issues. So our recommendations there including technology protection into decision-making on acquisitions. In other words, placing technology protection on the same level as cost, scheduling, and performance when we make our big investments and put out our large contracts. In other words, shifting the culture surrounding technology protection from one that was recently described as reactive enforcement to one of preemptive risk mitigation. And of course, providing greater support to industry partners for export control compliance and best practices for technology loss prevention. Now, as I end my comments here, I wanted to call out attention to the fact that a battle for the narrative is currently underway between the U.S. and PRC militaries. And the Navy and Marine Corps public affairs officers and Judge Advocate General officers, our maritime lawyers, have critical roles to play in countering mis, and disinformation, as well as telling the department's story here at home and especially abroad in this highly contested information space. So I hope you'll take a chance to take a look at that chapter on the nature of the maritime competition, because this may be the first product that I can recall that really focuses in on the maritime dimensions of competition with the PRC. And with that, I'll just close and sit down again and turn it on over. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. So Gordon Jaquith, I'm going to talk here about the enduring priority of strengthening maritime dominance and how the report touches on that. So as Dave and Díaz mentioned, the new NDAA language codifies and reinforces what DON does on a day-to-day basis. But importantly, it brings to the forefront questions about how a Navy that is designed to fight and win must be equally adept at peacetime competition. The focus in this section is on near-term recommendations for how DON can better position itself for such a competition within the priority to strengthen maritime dominance. The first key point is that a future fleet that mirrors the current fleet will not meet the Navy's needs below or above this threshold of conflict due to a reliance on a low number of capital ships. A fleet designed to both engage in protracted competition and also to prepare to fight and win must be larger, more distributed, more lethal, and better able to operate around the globe and within an ever-expanding weapons engagement zone. Although expanding ship construction, fielding new ships is likely to take a decade or more, near-term options can grow the fleet's capacity and capability using non-traditional approaches to both force multiply in the Indo-Pacific and outcapacity the PRC across the globe. The recommendations in this section are in 5 sections, 3 of which I'm going to touch on briefly here today. The first is on enhancing surface ship reach, lethality, and survivability. Recognizing capacity limitations, this section focuses on options to ensure each surface ship can see and touch as much of the maritime domain as possible and for longer periods of time. Such investments enable those forces to deepen commitment to allies and partners, to expose malign behavior, and conduct all missions short of war while also ensuring they have the necessary capabilities to transition to conflict. Specific recommendations here include fielding organic intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting capabilities to expand the reach of individual units such that they can patrol and provide capabilities over a larger area and with less reliance on other units. Next is maximizing munitions, both current and next generation. There may be no greater first step than ensuring platforms have full complements of advanced munitions with additional ready if conflict were to occur. First, DON simply needs more. Inventories are too low, particularly for critical munitions like the Standard Missile-6. The expanded and stable procurement strategies put forward for SM-6 should be adopted and explored for a broader range of key munitions, both self-defense and offensive, such as Maritime Strike Tomahawk. DON should also invest now in the next generation of munitions. The People's Republic of China's multi-year campaign to extend munitions ranges, capabilities, and capacities from land, air, and sea has been successful, resulting in an ever-expanding, overlapping WES. As such, DON must not just maximize assets currently in the fleet, but also invest now to ensure that upgrades deliver at the speed of relevance. Otherwise, munitions could already be outdated when reaching the fleet. DON should prioritize upgraded anti-ship and anti-air missiles to follow SM-6 and future heavyweight torpedoes to maintain undersea dominance. Combined with enhancements in organic ISR&T, these munitions investments will enable each ship to both see and touch wide swaths of the maritime domain, providing a means to grow the fleet and expand capabilities without additional platforms. Lastly here, operationalizing and fielding vertical launch system rearm at sea. The demonstration in October 2022 was a great first step, proving that a crane on an auxiliary ship can reload a DDG's missile tubes in low sea states. The future expanding of this rearming to protected anchorage or the open water would signal a significant leap in agility and resilience by dramatically extending reload locations beyond the piers. Rapid at-sea rearming would bolster deterrence, provide a near-term increase in combat power by maximizing the current fleet, and complicate an adversary's decision calculus, as they would know Don forces are less reliant on a single wave of ships, and that U.S. munition supply lines are no longer linked to vulnerable piers at fixed sites. As such, Don should prioritize R&D toward a full operational capability. The second here is about operationalizing and scaling the unmanned hybrid future, themes that Díaz already touched on. The key point is about moving beyond experimentation to field and operationalize multiple systems that have the promise to perform some missions currently conducted by more manned platforms, either more cheaply, such as in low-end maritime domain awareness, or with less risk, by operating in areas manned platforms cannot. Two specific recommendations here. The first is about expanding these investments in commercial off-the-shelf or commercially modified systems for this lower-end maritime domain awareness mission. This could increase options to expose PRC malign behavior, expand presence in theaters that currently receive limited support, operate in a lower threat testing ground and proving ground, and enhance partnership opportunities. Last one here is about investing now about what's known as .mil PFP, doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership and education, personnel, facilities, and policy to maximize effectiveness in fielding and technology once it has matured. The key point really is that investing in technology is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Don must avoid the sprint to nowhere, where high-tech investments are made without a .mil PF underpinning, resulting in ineffective or inefficient fielding. This is particularly the case for unmanned assets, for which .mil PFP implications are likely to be significantly different than the manned platforms for which we are familiar with. As one small example, as unmanned assets proliferate throughout the fleet, additional or different support infrastructure afloat and ashore may be needed. These are the type of things that we need to think through now, such that when the technology is mature, they can field at scale. Last section I'll touch on here is about acting now to realize strategic change. Although the options outlined in the sections here and some of what Ann and we'll talk about and Dave already has would better posture Don for competition and conflict with the PRC, they will all require time, manpower, and funding. Assuming anything besides a sizable strategic investment in Don funding, additional investments in new focus areas will require reprioritization, balancing across investments, and making hard choices and trade-offs, as all Don platforms and capabilities provide value. However, Don must prioritize those areas that can provide either enduring qualitative advantages or the means to offset the PRC's inherent advantages in geography and capacity. Building a force with the right mix of platforms, capabilities, and capacity to fulfill all of Don's peacetime and wartime missions will take many years. As such, near-term actions must seek to balance near-term results with those that will take years or decades to come to fruition. This latter category is no less important due to the timelines involved in strategic change. Specific recommendations here include innovating and fielding at the pace of relevance. We can't decelerate when promising technology is demonstrated, as only by transitioning and scaling new capabilities that enhancements are realized. We talked about part of this in the unmanned section, but another key area is the imperative to leverage and develop new adoption pathways. The current programming and budgeting process inside the department is deliberate, as it should be, for large multi-billion-dollar decisions. However, speed and agility are needed in select areas, particularly when trying to transition and field a demonstrated new capability. Don should work with DoD and Congress to develop and leverage such pathways through efforts including expanded reprogramming authorities, broader program element codes, and other ways to provide added flexibility to move funds. And also, alike with the great work Don is already doing in terms of the Disruptive Capabilities Office and others, maintaining close ties between experimentation and program offices to ensure that successful experimentation does more than deepen the valley of death by testing even more new systems without a transition path. Instead, have to invest heavily once technology has matured and operationalized in field. Last thing is about committing to and funding the enhanced future fleet. Previous and current analysis shows that the future fleet, as I mentioned, if it resembles the current fleet, it will not meet the needs of Don and the nation above or below the threshold of conflict into the future. This fleet must be larger, more distributed, more lethal, and better to operate inside and outside the West. So to fully embrace the peacetime and wartime missions and roles as laid out in the NDAA, a large strategic investment in naval capabilities is required. Absent that, Don will need to make targeted divestments of current capabilities to allow investment in the capabilities of the future. If hard choices are required, one option to consider is to reassess the size and shape of the carrier force. Although carrier two-ship buys provide cost savings, those savings come at a price. They lock in multiple procurements, leading to an inability to make future trade-off decisions. In addition, the long timelines associated with ship construction mean that a two-ship buy decided on today makes an assumption on operational environments up to 60 years in the future. Current uncertainty as to how well suited an 11-carrier fleet is to future force design goals and high-end conflict, combined with pressure on Don's top-line investments, suggests that near-term decisions that tie up large sums of investments for multiple years may be suboptimal. As such, Don should reassess the size and shape of the carrier force before making decisions on a block buy or the timing of future carrier procurement. To close, Don is making positive steps across all these areas within the constraints that they face. The recommendations in this paper can be seen as necessary first steps, targeted improvements designed to better position Don to compete in peacetime and to sustain and improve maritime dominance. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ann Parcell for her expertise on building a culture of warfighting excellence.
Good morning. I'm Ann Parcell, and my CNA colleagues and I, who specialize in manpower and personnel analysis, helped draft the section of the report on building a culture of warfighting excellence. This morning, I'll walk through our 5 top-line recommendations from that section of the report. 3 of the 5 recommendations concern service member recruiting and retention and really apply to the entire DAWN mission, not just to the strategic competition with the PRC. But this growing competition serves to highlight why these recommendations are so important for the sea services to address. First, we recommend that the services continue efforts to increase recruiting resources. The recent recruiting shortfalls, and this particularly applies to the Navy, require increasing resources such as the number of recruiters, marketing and advertising budgets, and recruiting incentives until recruiting goals can be met. And the reason is clear. The Navy cannot execute its mission if it doesn't have enough sailors. The good news, and credit due where credit is deserved, is that the Navy is increasing critical recruiting resources to levels required to meet the mission. Our second recommendation is for the services to maintain recruiting resources even when recruiting markets improve. Recruiting resources can be cut quickly when the economy weakens, for example, but it takes time to rebuild the recruiting apparatus and establish presence in recruiting markets when the economy strengthens and recruiting becomes challenging again, which inevitably it will. These downturns and upturns in the economy and other factors that affect recruiting markets are really hard to predict. So maintaining recruiting resources can hedge against market uncertainties and avoid costly recruiting shortfalls. Pivoting to retention, our third recommendation is for the services to pursue initiatives to leverage service member personal preferences to improve retention. Years of data analysis shows the effectiveness of monetary incentives, especially targeted incentives such as selective reenlistment bonuses. But at a certain point, there are limits to the ability of monetary incentives to improve retention, or at least to do so cost effectively. Chief of Staff Díaz mentioned earlier the DAWN's focus on improving housing, childcare, and access to mental health services for service members. These are great examples of how to improve quality of life and quality of service for our service members and may just improve retention along the way. In addition, we recommend that the services harness service member personal preferences and better align them with the manning needs of the services to improve retention. So for example, the Navy is developing a billet-based advancement system that will strive to reduce gaps at sea and increase sailors' assignment choices. It's not an either-or. Our final 2 top-line recommendations concern service member training and education and apply more specifically to the strategic competition with the PRC. And I'm going to echo some things that Dave mentioned earlier as well. Recommendation number 4 is for the services to conduct an assessment of current professional military education, institution, and programs. DAWN should assess whether its PME institutions are providing their students with an adequate understanding of the PRC, the PLA Navy, and the nature of this strategic competition. The PME curriculum and the way it is delivered must be updated regularly to ensure that our military leaders understand this strategic competition as it evolves. And relatedly, our fifth recommendation is for the services to develop learning modules to improve understanding of both adversaries and allies and make those modules widely available to all sea service personnel. Most Dawn personnel won't have the chance to attend a PME institution, but basic knowledge and understanding of this strategic competition is important for all service members to have, not just our senior leaders. The Dawn could develop an unclassified, online, self-paced series of learning modules to improve knowledge of both potential adversaries as well as allies and partners, and make these learning modules widely available. You can find additional details on these 5 top-line recommendations and all our other recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to Q&A right now. And as your moderator, my name is Admiral Jamie Foggo, United States Navy retired. I'm proud to be a senior fellow at the Center for Naval Analysis and the Dean of the Center for Maritime Strategy. So thank you, Dr. McGrady, for allowing me to come today. Gordon and Andrew, good to see you again. And Dr. Dave Finkelstein for putting together this report for the United States Navy. Now, Dave and I go back a long way, not to the Ming Dynasty, as he talked about, and the first Admiral of the Chinese Navy, Chung He, but it was 10 years ago, almost to this day, that Dave and I were participating in negotiations with the PLA Navy on rules of behavior in the air and maritime domain. That may, in fact, come back with the Xi-Biden summit, but for 30 days we haven't seen anything happen, so don't hold your breath. Delighted to be here. When Dave called me earlier this week and said, "You got everything? Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah." I'm really looking forward to this event, despite the terrible outcome of that football game that took place last weekend. Dave said, "I didn't see anything wrong with it." He's a West Pointer, and I'm a Naval Academy graduate. Today, first question goes to Chief of Staff, Mr. Chris Díaz. Chris was a special topic breakfast speaker at the Navy League a couple weeks ago, did a magnificent job. And one of the things he said was the most rewarding part of his career in the Navy was as a corpsman in the United States Navy with the Fleet Marine Force and sailors out there. And I couldn't agree more on how important that job is. As a commanding officer of the submarine, the independent duty corpsman is the guy you depend on most next to the chief of the boat. He's the one that has the ear of the crew. Everybody goes and talks to the corpsman about their problems. He's their mom, their dad, their priest, their prelate, and we couldn't do it without him. So well done to you, Chris. Brilliant career. And I'm delighted you're working for Mr. Del Toro, and I know he is too. So the first question on the report is, the vision you laid out in your opening remarks aligns very nicely with the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Strategy, and the Tri-Service Maritime Strategy. As you and the team in this room designed this effort and this report, how did you envision the findings of those strategies enhancing our new strategic framework?
So this report's the first of its kind to look at the maritime domain with that lens and apply that to the NSS, the NDS, the Tri-Service Strategy, with the new Title X peacetime competition language. If you look at the NSS, it talks about freedom of navigation of the seas. When you look at the NDS, and we played an active role in that. We look at the NDS, it talks about campaigning and integrated deterrence, of which we have a significant role. And in the Tri-Service Strategy, that in particular, this report helped to push us forward. Because you've heard the Secretary of the Navy talk about this need for a maritime statecraft and a more holistic look at the maritime domain. So here, the recommendations push us and expand us to be more inclusive to our federal maritime colleagues in MARAD, NOAA, et cetera. And that more expansive view is what we believe is necessary in this time of peacetime competition and to accelerate the recognition of the maritime power that this nation needs to be.
Thank you very much, Chris. And frankly, couldn't agree with you more. I've read the document cover to cover more than once, and I think it does all of those things. Second question to retired Navy Captain Steve Brock, who is the Senior Special Assistant to Secretary of the Navy. Just a word about Steve's brilliant career. I mean, he's done so many interesting things. I want to highlight a couple of them. First of all, he's co-founder and president of Earth Ethic, so he's interested in environmental security concerns. We talked beforehand about our mutual interest in IUUF, the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, and both CNA and the Center for Maritime Strategy are working on trying to solve that problem, as I know the Navy is too. He's been at the White House as Director for Asia Security Affairs on the National Security Council. He's been in the Pentagon as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Deputy Director for Intelligence, at the United Nations as an advisor to the UN Ambassador. He was Chief of Staff for Intelligence to Carrier Strike Group 11 on the USS Nimitz, and served in NATO billets as a NATO Combined Air Operations Officer in Vicenza, Italy, and in Berlin as the officer in charge of Defense Department's liaison office there. So, as well as being a Federal Executive Fellow at the RAND Corporation, a Naval Academy graduate, a youngster, decades after me. Delighted to have you here, Steve.
Thanks, sir.
My question to you is, since the Navy and the Marine Corps must maintain a global posture, what actions is the Department of the Navy taking in the near term to increase our presence and our capability of our fleet and the force afloat?
So the Secretary recognizes that we need to take action now. This is a very, very important period, as the report points out, to deter conflict. And so I'd first like to say we don't employ the force, we prepare the force. But how we are preparing the force, the vision here over the next 48 months to prepare the force, is going to have significant improvements to how that force is employed. The first thing I'll hit on, it was already mentioned before, is rearming our missile combatants at sea. The ability to rearm our missile combatants at sea using connected replenishment in sea states up to sea state 5 will allow us to keep our missile shooters on station indefinitely, being supplied and rearmed, and being able to provide long-range pulse strike without having to retire to be rearmed and be taken out of the conflict for weeks at a time. That is a revolution in naval warfare. I mean, I don't think people fully realize that we can't do that. We've never been able to do that. But we have a prototype on the West Coast that the CNO visited 2 weeks ago, and we are driving to have an at-sea demonstration with a missile combatant and a CLF ship off of Port Hueneme in August to demonstrate the ability to transfer missiles using connected replenishment. The Secretary would like to have the lead ships backfitted for that capability in 25, and then have a plan to refit more through 26 and the out years beyond that. So as you've just heard, I've talked about like the next 2 to 3 years. Our ability to rearm our missile combatants at sea in the next 2 to 3 years would have a profound deterrent effect. Secondly, modular refueling capabilities. We face a huge deficit in tanking capacity. We've also developed modular refueling capabilities that allow the rapid conversion of commercial product tankers, and rapid I mean in like 36 to 48 hours without any hot work or welding, to be able to leverage the vast number of commercial product tankers that our partners and allies have around the globe to get after our massive deficit in tankers and to be able to refill our oilers and our surface ships using those capabilities. Also looking at expeditionary repair capabilities and extra capacity, shipyard capacity in the Pacific to not only get after our maintenance backlogs, but also to be able to repair our ships in times of conflict. So all of these things I've just mentioned are logistics in nature, sustainment in nature, but they're critical to sustaining combat operations, and they'll send a powerful deterrent message to the PRC.
Steve, thank you very much. And let me just jump on that reloaded sea theme. April of 18, when I was Naval Forces Europe, and my 6th Fleet commander was Vice Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the President of the United States told Syria that we're going to punish you for these chemical weapons attacks. So it kind of let the cat out of the bag, but that was his modus operandi. So it was our job to come up with a strike plan. And we had to have a strike plan that was covert. We shot from the USS John Warner, the first Virginia-class submarine to shoot in combat Tomahawk line attack missiles. 3 facilities were devastated with very little collateral damage. Afterwards, John Richardson, the CNO, called me, hey, great job. What are we going to do about reloading the ship? My answer was, well, sir, it's a Virginia class. We haven't done that over here before, so she'll get reloaded when she goes home. Secretary of Defense didn't like that answer. That was General Mattis. He said to John Richardson, figure it out. And so Joe Tafalo, who was the sub-lant commander, figured it out and wrote us Spain, but not without some pain. And that was alongside. So we need that capability proliferated around the world. We also need what you're doing at sea. So thanks for that. Couldn't agree more on tankers. MSP, TSP, and console laps, we need a lot more of that. Speaking of surface ships, let's turn to our expert on surface ships here today. It's ironic, last week I got a call from Mary Walsh at CBS, and she said, would you do an interview with David Martin on the success of the surface ships in the Red Sea? And I said, as a submariner, I'd be delighted to talk about surface ships and the Aegis program. But let me tell you, folks, Mason, Carney, and Hudner, I want to say they're knocking the ball out of the park, but they're knocking the drones out of the sky and the missiles out of the sky. Another one last night. So please, give the Surface Navy and those sailors out there a round of applause for the job they're doing. Next question goes to Admiral Paul Schlise. Good friend. He was over in the 5th Fleet when I was there. Native of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, heartland of America. Surface warfare officer extraordinaire. A graduate of Marquette University. He's been on some great ships. Quickly, Flint, Antietam, Hopper, John Paul Jones, commanded the Halsey, Desron 7, and also Carrier Strike Group 10, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, who's also deployed in the Arabian Gulf right now. On the Chief of Naval Operations staff, he's a director of surface warfare, and he's been a detailer at PERS 41 in surface officer distribution, so quite qualified to be here today and talk about these things. So, Paul, what are some of the actions the Navy is taking, either in strengthening maritime dominance, in line with this report, building a culture of warfighting excellence, we just talked about that, and enhancing strategic partnership that you would like to highlight with our partners and allies?
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thanks for as we watched Ike head back over. I was not that I don't love time in the cubicles in the building, but every day I keep an eye on my shipmates out there forward deployed, doing the nation's work. So I double down on the well done to everyone out there. On the OpNav staff, N9I, my job is a prioritization of resourcing. There's never enough money to go around. It's just about Christmas time. We've all got our lists, and they're extensive, and there's not enough resources. So getting those priorities right is tremendously important. CNO's Title X responsibility is to man, train, and equip the fleet, and we on her staff work to do that. Gordon touched on munitions in terms of strengthening maritime dominance. Increasing the number of our munitions, the quantity is incredibly important in those most capable munitions. We've got to do that. Incredibly important, and we do have a lot of resources over the past 3 budgets going toward that. And that's kind of a tactical view on this, and a little bit more of a strategic view, and something that things that we're doing to strengthen maritime dominance, strengthen our industrial base. The submarine industrial base, or SIB, we've recognized that our submarine capacity and production rates aren't where we want them. So there's been a push, from the Navy, from DoD, and well supported on the Hill to get after increasing the capacity of those submarine building yards and investing in the people that work there. We talked earlier about recruiting challenges and the battle for people, the battle for talent, and those yards are having trouble. You're trying to recruit from that same group of folks. So, getting those folks into the yards, and we want them to be 30-year shipbuilders and become expert shipbuilders and submarine builders, and to continue to produce the world's best submarines. And a parallel effort in our public yards, where we do most of our nuclear maintenance, is SIOP, and that's the recapitalization of those yards. They've been around for a long time, and we found that some of the dry docks are a little tired, so we're getting after replacing and upgrading dry docks. And again, investment in people there is incredibly important. On the OPNAV staff, a little bit more tactical, but we've got the NAV plan implementation framework, which is a cross-functional effort to get after more advanced capabilities and focused on things like terminal defense, long-range fires, contested logistics, and this is a process that we've used to prioritize, again, those scarce resources to get our capabilities up to where we need them. And I'll touch on Kearney a little bit more. Culture of warfighting excellence. The report speaks to the need for recruiting and retaining those great people. I think Kearney's a great example of what we're getting right in our training. A couple years back when I was Ike Strike Group Commander, that 30-day Comp 2X was the toughest 30 days of training in my career. We were exhausted at the end. And guess what? It's only gotten harder and more complex. And now we watch Kearney and some other ships out there performing incredibly well under near combat conditions. And as I watch them, I see a calm, cool, confident crew. We didn't train them exactly for this scenario, but guess what? They know they're good enough to think on their feet and adjust to the scenario that they've been put into. And that's a great, just a great commentary on the culture that we have in our great training. And we've got a bunch of steely-eyed killers out there when we need them to be. So well done to Kearney and all of our ships out there, defeating the threats in that complex scenario. And we'll comment real briefly on enhancing strategic partnerships. I don't think there's any better example than AUKUS. Working closely with two of our long-standing allies to get after getting the Aussies' nuclear sub capability. And then I'm also excited about AUKUS Pillar 2, which is not in the has gotten in as much press, but this is a long-term commitment to those two allies to develop advanced capabilities in cyber, in AI, quantum computing, hypersonics. So this is in its nascent stages, but that is where we're headed with Pillar 2 of AUKUS. And it'll be, as it picks up speed here, that'll be executed right alongside the submarine procurement efforts that we're working. So I'll stop there, sir, but lots going on in those three focus areas.
Hey, thanks a lot, Paul. And on Comp 2X, I haven't actually gone through one on a surface ship, but done them on submarines. And the last one that was done for the Ford before she went over for this deployment, she's now past her regular deployment time, been extended, was probably the best Comp 2X that the strike group had ever run down in Norfolk. And I talked to Admiral Caudle about that. Ford was 15 to 17 seconds faster in sortie generation rate. One aircraft lands, next aircraft takes off. Why? You move the island back. You got another half acre of space on board. You're refueling from the deck. 23 new prototypes, which people criticized. Well, let's just put that away right now because that carrier is performing magnificently. So well done to you and your contemporaries out there. Now on to the United States Marine Corps and Brigadier General Stephen, call sign Beast, Lightfoot. Beast works for one of my friends, Lieutenant General Hazel Heckel at McCITIC, the Marine Corps Combat Developments Command. He was the commanding officer of Marine Aircraft Group 24, and he was a White House pilot. He flew Marine One and the President all over the place. He served as the Special Military Assistant to the Undersecretary of the Navy. He has 3,700 hours. This is amazing. And he's a qualified instructor pilot in the following aircraft: 2 kinds of Hueys, 2 kinds of Cobras, the Frog, that 46 with twin rotors, the Sea Stallion, the Osprey, and remotely piloted vehicles. He's a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University. I was up there and commissioned the second lieutenants and ensigns last year, so Beast, welcome. And a tribute to his training, I was overseas, I'm a NATO mentor, working with a team on an exercise, and there was a Marine major there who was a Cobra pilot, call sign Twilight. Beast gave him the call sign. And I looked at this guy and I said, let me guess, Twilight because you look like Dracula. He goes, yeah, I look like a vampire. Handsome guy. But this major took the lead in that classroom and got things done. Great credit to Beast Lightfoot. Beast, my question to you is, what are some of the actions the U.S. Marine Corps is taking to strengthen maritime dominance and strengthen your culture of warfighting and enhance your strategic partnerships all over the world?
Thank you, Admiral Foggo, and I just want to say also thanks for serving as our guest of honor at the 248th Marine Corps birthday for Headquarters Marine Corps Combat Development and Integration, where Hazel Heckel, my boss, Lieutenant General Heckel, invited and just brought the house down. I mean, just a phenomenal speaker, motivated. I wanted to join the Marine Corps after he was done talking, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm already wearing, I am a Marine, what's going on here? But it was absolutely fantastic. I also want to just say thanks to the CNA team. Mr. Díaz, thank you for inviting me here today. I do appreciate that. And on the CNA team, we've got folks in our headquarters. So we've got a Dr. Nick Woods who just showed up this year. We had Charles Nickerson that we worked with. Now he's down in North Carolina. And we work very closely with Jonathan Geithner, all the time on Mary. We talk pretty regularly. And the CNA team it is good to know because we all think we're the busiest people in the world. And we are pretty darn busy. But when you've got 45 authors, of a document, and when you can reach out, and when we're busy, we reach out, we need help. And so CNA providing that just analysis, that mental agility, to look at what are the things that we need to look at as a maritime force, is just super helpful. So I just want to say thanks for that. As far as, what are we doing with the SecNav's guidance and those 3 pillars, first I would say it has been very helpful to have clear guidance. Very helpful. When you have clear guidance that matches with the national security, defense, and military strategies, and then you have a commandant who's in lockstep with the CNO, and then they continue that guidance down, it makes it, I won't say easy, but I will say it's a heck of a lot easier than when there's conflicting guidance. So in that regard, Force Design 2030, which we're now just referencing as Force Design, because in 2019, Force Design 2030 sounded pretty cool because it was really far away, it was over a decade away. Now if you say Force Design 2030, if we continue that, it'd be like, that's just right around the corner, isn't it, So it's Force Design, and we're keeping that. Always thinking beyond this FITUP. We're actually thinking 3 FITUPs out, from now until 3 FITUPs. So there's a few things that I would say I'd like to bring up, and then of course I'll just, there's going to be RFIs out there, I am sure. But the reason we're here today is just talk about campaign and crisis below the level of armed conflict. And I will tell you, that is something that the Marine Corps has been beating that drum because we believe in that completely. That is why we think that is a huge part of, when you look at campaigning, what are we doing? We're always wanting to get with our partners. We want to, when I say partners, I mean our coalition partners, and within the joint and the naval maritime capabilities. But we want to, the more you go and you campaign with your partners, the more capability you figure out what works, so just think about interoperability is what we look for, but at times when you have enough of a partnership, like with the UK, and we had F-35 Bravos going out and deploying on the Queen Elizabeth, that's not just interoperable, that's interchangeable when you have the ability to go and do something like that. And you can campaign at different times of the year where it's more meaningful. And so we're looking hard at those things. So when and everyone is a little bit tough on people right now, and so you have to figure out how do you maximize the resources that you have, not just with the gear and equipment, but certainly the people, because none of this is any good without the people. So timing the campaigning, and then you look at when you move into crisis, and I think that campaigning and crisis, no kidding, are just, they're linked. They're absolutely linked. They're complementary to one another. And then when you go into conflict, they're all linked, right? Because you're going to fight the way you train. So if you're campaigning consistently, and then you have to have the ability to react in crises, and that is like one area that we think we need some improvement, and this report states that we need more resources. The modernization, the readiness rates, of our amphibious ships is something that it needs to increase. If we're going to see heel-to-toe MEUs, Marine Expeditionary Units in the Amphibious Readiness Group, the ARGs, and we need 31 amphibs and 35 landing ship mediums. That is what's going to allow us to respond to crises all over the world, from the East Coast and the West Coast, 24/7. We don't ever want to have more scenarios where one of our partners, whether it's Turkey, or anyone else that has a disaster, and we're not there to assist. Because that's what strengthens the partnership, right, is when someone has a problem and they know that they can go to the United States and they can say, thank you for helping us. It just strengthens those partnerships. I mean, we're seeing that in the Philippines right now where, China's doing some pretty malign behavior, right? Like when you're ramming ships, when you're using water cannons, when you're using underwater sonar, lasers, blinding people, not helpful. Not helpful at all for, they're creating a problem for themselves, and we need to be able to take advantage of that by showing that we are the partner of choice. And I think that we do that regularly. It would be nice to have that 24/7 capability constantly on the seas, ready to respond at a moment's notice for those capabilities. So the next thing I just want to talk just briefly about is we talked a little bit about, and we had some just really great comments from our folks earlier. I'm going to go a little bit out of order, but I do want to get to the modernization of the Marine Corps because I think that's one of the things that you may want to hear about it. What are the things that we're working on? But some of the questions, so with FAOs and talent management, I thought that our commandant has made it very clear that FAOs, just because we talked about with partnerships, so important. And I can tell you, he has given us that guidance. And having just served on a recent selection board for promotion, I can tell you that we emphasized FAOs and we promoted. We promoted FAOs, and I would say it hasn't always been that way. So we are definitely placing emphasis on that. So just so you know, we are indeed getting after that. For Mr. Jaquith, you talked about commercial off-the-shelf capabilities. And I will tell you, we are moving in that direction hard, where we can. Obviously, UAS unmanned systems are hard because a lot of them are made in China, right? A lot of the parts. It's tough sometimes to actually find unmanned systems that aren't made in China, but we've done it. And we call them blue UAS. So we are going after blue UAS in earnest because we know that beyond the programs, and we can get into whatever discussion you want on POM and planning and programs, but beyond that, you have to be faster than that. You can't, we're working on POM 26 right now, and if we were to sit here and say, don't worry, we'll get you those UAS in 2026, a commander out there is gonna go, well, what else can we do about this? So blue UAS has a list of like a couple dozen UASs that they can go out and purchase with FMF funding and start using them time now. In addition to all the planning and POMing that we're doing for programs of record. So just wanted to address that with you. For Dr. Parcell, great points about recruiting and retention. I would say that we realize that. We know that the asymmetric advantage is always going to be that individual, that trained Marine, that we equip our personnel. We equip our personnel and we train them properly, and they are what provides that capability for us. So just as if you didn't realize it, and I was lucky enough to serve on a Marine Corps recruiting station commanding officer board, and I think we're going to continue to put our best in recruiting, but it's a top 3% selection. So when you are going to go be a recruiting station CO, you are the top 3% of the folks that are competing for that. And I can tell you, I'm not top 3%. Like I looked at those records in the board and thought, my gosh, I wouldn't survive if I was on this board. So we are going to continue to send our very best out there, get the best out there, looking for that talent. And then when it comes to retention, we are actively, again, the Commandant has charged us with, we need to make sure that we keep our people. We used to have a long process of retention that has reduced significantly from like 20 steps down to a 1 to 2 steps. Like if you say, I want to stay in the Marine Corps, we're like, okay, let's sign here, and then let's figure out, do you want to keep doing what you're doing? Do you want to try something else? What is it that makes you want to stick around? Because as you know, you recruit the Marine, but you retain the family as well, so we know quality of life is a big piece of this. Balancing all these things is going to be extremely challenging. I mean, we're working on POM 26 right now. It's one of the things I spend a lot of time on. So I'm actually glad to be here because otherwise I'd be working on POM 26 right now. So it's actually good to get away from that for a minute and get some perspective and then go back to it. But the bottom line is we know that retention is going to be a lot more effective than trying to recruit more and more people when fewer and fewer of the U.S. population is actually eligible to join our military for various reasons. So you've got to, once you get them in, you've got to say, hey, what can I do to help you? You got to train them. You got to give them a mission that's meaningful. And I think that we have that in the naval service. It's a mission that's bigger than you. You are doing something important, for your country and for the globe. So retaining them, and one example is being able to stay in one place for more than 3 years. Sometimes people, if you tell someone, are you going to choose the Marine Corps or are you going to choose your family? Well, I will tell them to choose their family. Your family's with you forever. And if your family is in a spot where sticking around somewhere for one extra tour, 6 years instead of 3 is what's going to help you stay in, that's what we need to do. And we are doing that, across the board. So I just wanted to address that. And then finally, Mr. Brock, you mentioned reloading and magazine depth, and I will just say that is something we think about all the time. When you look at the fact that we have shifted to the Indo-Pacific, we have been trained, organized, and equipped, and rightfully so, to deal with OAF and OEF. And not until 2019, did Commandant Berger and now Commandant Smith actually press in the accelerator pedal for us and saying, let's go. We were ready for the desert. We were ready for, kind of not the same as getting ready for China and the actual maritime threat. That was just, we kind of left that alone for a while, and now we know that is so important globally for so many reasons. So we're doing that. And with that, we created the Standing Force. Okay? That was one of the concepts. Because when Commandant Berger asked 7th Fleet back in 2019, what do you need the Marine Corps to do? What can we do to help out? He said, I need you to be able to control or deny key maritime terrain. And that's mostly going to be in the SLOCs. And you can do that all over the globe. It's not just the Indo-Pacific. But in this instance, he was talking about the Indo-Pacific, archipelagos, and how can you make it to where it's going to be difficult for ships and submarines and other watercraft to go through here. And so what do you need to do? Well, we already have 20,000 Marines west of the international date line. Let's equip them to do this job. Let's give them this mission, and let's give them the tools to accomplish it. So sensing, long-range fires, and this is where I'll get to the capacity piece. Long-range fires, if you're going to be agile, you're going to be lethal, what you're probably not going to be is big. So we want to be the JTAC for the Joint Force and for the Naval Force. And so I'm getting the hurry up. So I'll just end with this. We know that we have the ability with Gator radar, MQ-9s, things that we're shifting to right now, to sense and make sense of things that are out there. But our magazine depth is not the greatest. We know that. And so we may be of most use to the force by sensing, making sense, passing that information to the ships, even to the Army, with Patriot missiles, and say, here's some targets that we think would be useful. And in the meantime, we can still keep that deterrence capability, even though we don't have the magazine depth. My apologies for such a long diatribe. That's it.
No problem, Beast. That was excellent. And foot stomping on the FAO discussion. I'm on the board of directors at the Olmsted Scholar Foundation. We send 15 officers overseas every year to get a master's degree, learn a foreign language, understand the culture. The Air Force calls this the gold standard. Marine Corps embraces it. Navy too. We'd love to see the best and the brightest in that program. And frankly, the foundation pays for the tuition and scholarship. Let's go to audience questions. And we'll do a quick round of audience questions in the room, and then we'll go to online. Sir, please state your name.
Yes, sir. Hi, James Siebens. I'm with the Stimson Center.
Good to see you, James.
You too, sir. I wanted to follow up on some of what General Lightfoot raised about crisis response and the need to compete below the threshold of armed conflict. A lot has been said about our high-end warfighting capacity, and I think one of the most important ends of the spectrum is this lower end of the spectrum, where really enhancing strategic partnerships plays a critical role, and enhancing the capabilities of our partners is critical. So can you all speak to how the Navy is going about improving our partners' capacity to counter some of the coercive behavior that we see the PRC engaged in?
Would you like to take that?
Yes, very, very important. As we make our partners stronger, that only helps us. Across a whole spectrum, for instance, the Secretary is very focused on transferring the great lessons learned from Task Force 59 and the amazing, very unique partnerships that we had out there to 4th Fleet and to 7th Fleet. And that, amongst many things, improves the maritime domain awareness, of our, especially our Southeast Asian and our Pacific Island partners that have vast EEZs that are being exploited. And you may also be aware the Coast Guard now has unilateral ability to enforce the EEZs of Papua New Guinea, Palau, and Micronesia. A very big ocean, not a lot of Coast Guard assets, so we're thinking about how can we assist those partners and assist the Coast Guard in enforcing the EEZs against resource exploitation, illegal fishing, et cetera. Also, our Seabees and Office of Naval Research are doing a tremendous amount that every day we learn something new that's been going on in the Indo-Pacific from those organizations to enhance the capability and capacity of our partners. For instance, the Secretary of the Navy has delivered climate resilience decision tools to heads of state in the region. And we're also, of course, working on the cooperative security locations for dual use capacity, us in times of conflict, them now, and for the economic viability of those places that really could use the development help. I would also say that we are in charge of manning, and my classmate, class of 90, is heading out to be the 7th Fleet Commander, Admiral Kacher, architect of the West Capella operation, and he is going to be a great representative out there doing all the things that you just described on executing the gray zone, below the threshold of conflict, the competition that we have to win with our partners. We have to meet them where they are, though. I mean, the Secretary has gone out to Fiji and other places and said, hey, we are here to help you with your security threats. Because the only way, in my view, that they have to make a choice on security is if we neglect them. They prefer us to be the security partner. They all don't want to have to make the choice between the two of us, but the only way that they're going to have to make that choice is if we forget about them and neglect them, and we're not going to do that.
Okay, and Fred Kacher's got a great book on how to navigate the Pentagon. It's a must read for anybody in there. I spent 12 years in that place. Megan Eckstein.
Hi, good morning. Megan Eckstein with Defense News. My question, I guess, is primarily for Admiral Schlise, but anybody else who would like to add on about the hard budget choices. Admiral Gilday had previously talked about in past budget years, when it comes to which ships to buy, which ships to divest, sort of prioritizing them when it comes to the high-end war fight, and then you draw the line, and that's the cutoff. I wonder how that compares to this idea of budgeting for below the threshold of conflict. Are they necessarily in tension, or is there a way to find some lower dollar items to support this competition phase and maybe squeeze that in around the way the budgeting is happening today?
Well, great question, Megan. Thank you. I mean, the Navy's out there, horizontally engaged around the globe right now. Of course, in the news right now is our support to the Ukrainian conflict, and of course the conflict in the Middle East. But the Western Pacific is still there, and we're still there, in numbers. As that on-the-beat deterrence force, and that's the kind of what the NDA language speaks to, that the peacetime presence and the importance of that. In terms of platforms, we're cranking up the small surface combatant. The FFG-62 program is an example of maybe a DDG Junior, sort of, a DDG-51, several of similar capabilities, but a little smaller crew, not as many missiles, but a lot of nice capability out there. So, that's an example of if there's a little bit of a high-low mix that we're targeting, that's an example of where we're headed there. And then unmanned, the work of CTF-59, getting those unmanned platforms and capabilities out there. To surveil the maritime commons 724 without having sailors out there on those platforms, and the unmanned, we got unmanned capability in 4th Fleet and 7th Fleet, as Chief of Staff mentioned. We just took 4 of our unmanned vessels on a trip through Japan and out to do exercises in Australia. So those capabilities all add to the numbers that I think is required. This mission requires a bigger fleet, our shipbuilding rates. So, I talked about SIB and those investments in the industrial base that will increase those shipbuilding rates over the years to come and get us to that fleet size that we seek. And meanwhile, some of these unmanned capabilities, as they mature and get out there in numbers, are going to add to our capacity there.
All right, Karen, do you want to go to an internet online question, please?
Thank you. We're getting some great questions online. In the interest of time, I'll stick to one that's related to, I think, what we're just speaking about. From Mike Studeman, he asks if the Navy has any recommendations to Congress or generally regarding rebuilding the National Industrial Base for shipbuilding, munitions, and other unmanned capabilities needed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Send my warm regards to Admiral Studeman, one of my favorite guys, and helped me out certainly in my time in the Pentagon. Who would like to take that? Steve, are you the industrial base guy? Yeah.
My first answer, we focused on what we're trying to do rapidly to make the current fleet we have as formidable as possible. But the Secretary recognizes that the long-term health of the Navy all resides in our ability to be much more capable in the shipbuilding sphere, and the sinews of naval power reside in commercial shipbuilding. We are the most dominant Navy in the world, and we're working tirelessly to remain so, but there's never been, over the long term, there's never been a naval power that also wasn't a commercial shipping and shipbuilding power. And we used to be that. Over the last 30 years, that's all dissipated. We've assumed a lot of shipbuilding sea lift and economic risk that we can no longer take because we faced the first maritime competitor the nation's faced in over 120 years. In order to get at the shipbuilding issues, we need to bring in a broader number of U.S. shipbuilders. This aligns with Jake Sullivan's, strategic industries that are critical for economic security, national security, but also need public investment to spur private capital. The foundations of our once maritime power are all mostly still there. If you look at what's in law, construction differential subsidies are still in law. The workforce training authorities that Merit has are all still in law. They just need to be funded. So we are on a campaign to build awareness first, and this is part of that, and bringing folks to the cause to advocate for the return of the maritime power and the shipbuilding of the nation, and then take the actions that we're trying to take. Because if we can, there's also a really critical element here for partners and allies. The current situation is ripe for the world's best shipbuilders, especially our allies in Asia, Korea and Japan, to, as the Secretary said, consider investing in Jones Act compliant U.S.-owned subsidiaries to infuse a great deal of capacity and capability and modernization into the U.S. shipbuilding ecosystem. And we're working hard to build awareness in that area also. There's also a large range of very capable smaller shipyards, especially in the Gulf, that build the offshore support vessels that could be leveraged much more so than we currently are. But it all boils down to competition, modernizing our shipyards, digital shipyards of the future, and creating that labor force that we need, new-collar jobs. It's all very complicated, but each one of those keys turned simultaneously is what's needed to sort of incentivize what I've just described. Because we need it to build affordable ships in the future, in the numbers we need on time. We also need it for the sea lift that we're going to require for a high-end conflict and for these global responsibilities and winning the competition with China day in, day out for how many ever decades it's going to go on.
Digitization of shipyards, amen, Steve, that's great. And Admiral Studeman had a speech about a year ago before he retired that highlighted the threat from the PLA Navy in China. It went viral, it was excellent. And that's why I love this report that you have put together with the Center for Naval Analysis. You sponsored it because it also highlights these threats out there and the fact that we need to do something about it. Karen, you have one more internet online question? Okay, one more over here. Mike Nunziato, recently retired.
Thanks, Admiral. Mike Nunziato, I'm a former retired just last month, UCOM Navy FAO. Now currently a Director of Business Development for Navy International Programs at Act 1 Federal. My question, I think, more goes to Cause Díaz. It's about interoperability and interchangeability with our partners and the holdups that we have with Cold War era policies like ITAR and easing up on tech transfer to try and get our partners and allies up to speed with us so that we can combat this problem. So I'd like to know, Cause, what's the Navy doing about easing up on those policies, thinking about that for the future, and then finally, what role can the defense industry play in that? Thank you.
Yeah, this process of innovation at the speed of relevancy, right? The way we think about define innovation is adopting novel solutions, right? And that process requires more than just picking the technology off the shelf and then scaling it, right? What we're finding is that there is often the case that the technology is outpacing the apparatus that it needs to accept it, right? So adoption becomes really crucial. And adoption, a huge part of that is policy. And the policy decisions that were currently in place for a previous fleet in force. Perfect example, I was just down in 4th Fleet speaking with my dear friend, Admiral Jim Aiken, and I was learning how they're out there experimenting with platforms and devices in the uncrewed realm. And that there are policies that are putting into place right now that are handcuffing their ability to actually move out, right? And so part of what these offices, both Rapid Capabilities Office and Disruptive Capability Office, that are identifying the warfighter needs, part of their job to synthesize is to not just identify what those are, but also to look at where the policies are lagging and need updating to be able to have those things married. So we recognize that it is an issue, and thankfully we have a lot of smart people getting after it.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, Jim Aiken was my Deseret commander, amazing guy. He's got the kinetic energy of a BB in a trash can. He never stops. CNA asked me to go down and do the large-scale exercise in Norfolk this past year as the Secretary of Defense. That was pretty cool. But you know, one thing they couldn't do was the exercise planners couldn't act quickly enough to incorporate hybrid warfare and unmanned. And Jim and I talked about this. He goes, I got gadgets all over the place. But in the time it takes to plan these things out, which is a 2-year process, it wasn't agile enough. We got to get better at that. We got to get better at ITAR. Karen, did you want to do one more, or are we at time? Okay, there's a gentleman in the back, sir.
Good morning, Tom Shugart, CNAS. Great report. One question. So there's some clear differentiation there between further investment in service combatants and in areas for hard choices, the naming of aircraft carriers and amphibs. With now apparently 1,000 MRBMs in China's inventory, many of which are anti-ship capable, 500 IRBMs, which are all anti-ship capable, and the knowledge that they are testing against destroyer-shaped targets, I'm interested in what the differentiation is there, and perhaps survivability, and why the differentiation investment. Thank you.
The submariner's not going to take that one. The surface warfare officer is. Go ahead.
A great question, and I mean, Gordon's comments regarding the question of the relevancy of the carrier going forward are important, and allow a surface guy to make a pitch for a carrier. As the crisis kicked off in the Middle East, what was SecDef's first move? Announcing the Ike deployment to the Middle East. And all those surface ships out there that we talked about Carney, and there's been a few others that have been shooting and helping to protect some of that civilian shipping out there. So yes, the threat. There's no question that the high-end threat in the Western Pacific is real and it's growing, and finding that balance of the carrier, the mobile and arguably most survivable airport in DoD, is that going to continue to be relevant in the future? I think, obviously the air wings that are flying today and the air wing of the future don't look much like at the end of World War II, the air wings then. So, that's how the carrier continues to recreate itself, and it's proven relevant in every conflict and as a deterrent force right now in the Middle East and in the Med. So, but deciding what that right mix of those platforms in this, more as the threat becomes more complex, that's the day-to-day work of OpNav, and finding that right balance is what we've got to do with the limited resource environment that we work in every day.
It really speaks to the maritime fight and maritime dominance. And in closing, I'll say, one of my favorite quotes from President Bill Clinton, 1993 on the Roosevelt. In times of crisis, the first question the president asks is, where are the carriers? What happened? We had the forward in theater. We sent her to the East Med on October 7th after the Hamas attack on Israel. Additionally, Admiral Tom Ishii has the Cavour, the Charles de Gaulle partner allied strike groups out there. And we sent the Ike into the Med and through the Suez and into the Arabian Gulf. So, hey, is there any doubt why we need a strong Navy? I don't think so. I'd like to thank our panelists today for a magnificent job, CNA for a magnificent report, and all of you for coming and participating. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to everyone.